The Abandons is Netflix's latest series to be released on the platform, and if you've watched me for a while, you know that I love a Western drama. American Primeval came out on the platform at the start of the year, which showed that Netflix can hold their own when up against the likes of Taylor Sheridan. But how did this one fare? Well, I wanted to share what I thought of the show, as well as explaining the deeper themes embedded within it and that massive cliffhanger of an ending. So let's get into it. Here is a review of The Abandons and the ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. My review of the show. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I didn't actually enjoy the show that much. The first episode was pretty good, and the last episode was the best in the series, but I think there was quite a lot that was wrong with it, and I found myself a bit bored throughout the episodes that made up the middle. Taylor Sheridan's 1883 and American Primeval did a great job at convincing us about what was happening in their stories and truly transporting us to the time period which is comfortably over 100 years ago. But what I'd say this felt like was almost like an imitation of that, and I just didn't quite buy the time period that we were thrown into, along with the behaviours, mannerisms and characters that were being shown to us. I felt no true attachment to either Fiona's family or the Van Ness family, and I thought that was a bit of a shame. I don't know whether it's because of the 7-episode short runtime or the lack of time with the wider characters, but it just felt like there was a ton of chopping and chasing around with the story rather than spending quality time with them. There was clearly a backstory with Constance's husband that we found out nothing about, and considering Fiona was the co-lead, I knew nothing of her other than the fact that she killed her husband once upon a time. Lena, Heady and Gillian also didn't really feel like they were the right casting choice for these characters. Heady felt like she had the same facial expression throughout the entirety of the 7-episode run, and I was shocked that this was the Cersei Lannister because this performance was far from what we saw in Game of Thrones. I often think that the cinematography is something that makes the shows that are set in this time period have a sense of immersion to them, and this one just had that cheap-looking Netflix gloss that some of its shows have that didn't really allow the grit of the time period and the brutality of many of the situations to cut through. I also wasn't a fan of the modern music that would play over the credits. It wasn't needed, and again, it just Netflixified the entire show, making it lose a level of integrity. I felt like there were almost too many characters in this show for its own good, or at least they tried to establish too many character arcs in one go where none of them were actually able to resolve. For example, Elias, Dahlia, Lilith and Albert had moments where things were building for them, but once they'd served their purpose in that short moment, they'd just be moved on, so they felt like inconsequential storylines. At least with Garret, it felt like he had this burning desire to impress his mother and to not be left in the shadows, and then also with Trisha, she didn't recognize herself in her family and felt like a stranger, so she was looking for a way out. But with Fiona's children, it was just the complete opposite. I think some of the performances and the writing of dialogue was pretty weak too. Garret as a character just didn't feel that well performed and was just a bit like a whiny child. The scene where he was out with Jack wondering what was going on felt so stale in delivery, and it actually took me out of what little immersion that I had. I also think Elias wasn't that convincing either. He was almost too clean in appearance, and it just tied into that effect where shows like this need to have a sense of realism to them with the way that people looked and acted back then. But it just didn't feel like it was there with the main cast. Okay, so when it comes to what I actually liked about the show, there isn't actually that much because I thought it was a pretty boring show, which says a lot because I love westerns. But I did think the core message and theme of the value of family and that one would do anything for them was something that did cut through. Constance and her desire to seek revenge on Fiona for killing her son, but also securing some kind of legacy so her family could live well. Even if it means bringing harm and suffering to the entire town that she heads up, whilst also being willing to lose the very people that she's supposed to be protecting. And also Fiona, with the fact that she wasn't prepared to sell the land that she settled on because of a promise that she made to Angus Teller to look out for his children. However, I like the fact how sometimes family could be used as a ruse in order to carry out the acts of aggression, rage and anger, whilst masking the true purpose of somebody's intentions. Sometimes it goes too far, and that's what we saw at the end when Fiona went inside of the burning house in order to kill Constance. The final episode was one that I did actually really enjoy. I thought there was so much tension that was present, and the rage that was building between Fiona and Constance was infectious and enjoyable to watch. Seeing Fiona's family also carrying out the plan of attacking the house was exciting, and it provided what felt like the first bit of action in about 2 or 3 episodes. That's probably one of my biggest faults with this show. There was the opportunity to have some great gunfights, chases, and action, but it just fell short. The opening scene almost lured us into a false sense of security because I thought the entire show was going to be just like that. With the cliffhanger at the end, we didn't see who it was that was walking out of the house, and to be honest, I don't actually really care. I cared that little about these characters that I'm not actually that fussed about if Fiona survived or if Constance did, and I think that kind of sums up my experience when watching the show. They were both just as annoying as each other. It's looking like The Abandons was written with a season 2 in mind, so it could end up returning. There's no official word right now, but we'll just have to keep our eyes peeled as there are many stories that could get picked up and focused on within season 2. We've got Adam Winston's past to be uncovered, Xavier Roache and the Red Masked Bandits, the collapse of the Van Ness family following their home being destroyed, and the Caillou tribe potentially launching an attack following one of them being killed. The ending explained. When it came to the ending of this show, it all connected right back to the very first scene. What started with the Van Ness family causing a fire on Fiona's land resulted with Fiona's family causing a fire on the Van Ness's land. Constance was looking for a way to acquire the Hollow to facilitate the Van Ness Mines expansion project. The Hollow was a piece of land that was shared between 4 families, and she was trying to get them to move off of the land, but they were refusing to do so instead she was driving them off by tormenting them. With Willem, the eldest Van Ness son, being attacked by Dahlia following him assaulting her and then later being killed by Fiona. That then sparked the big cover-up that the families had. As time went on, the body of Willem was eventually found, and with Fiona declining the deal that Constance put forward, which would have allowed them to have kept some of their land, Constance was furious because it meant that Mr. Vanderbilt was going to withdraw his stake in the project, which would mean that the town of Angel Ridge would begin to struggle and she'd lose the power that she held. This led Constance to want to erupt a war with the Caillou people during the peace talks because that would then put the Hollow as a target and they could then begin an attack there. Constance was a woman filled with greed, but masked it with caring about family. She didn't care that her son Willem's body wasn't found, but happily made out like Grady Mitchell's body was her son if it brought her an improved relationship with Fiona in order to secure the dirt that her house was upon. With Dahlia being taken by Constance, that was what led Fiona and her family to launch an attack on her house with the hopes of getting her back. Both of these mothers cared greatly about their children, and Constance always put a focus on the fact that Fiona's family weren't part of her blood, so she didn't know what it truly felt like to lose a child. However, we saw that the love of a mother isn't only shared through blood with the way that Fiona acted. What was interesting was that Trisha didn't care for her mother and felt extremely out of place in her own family, which was all blood related, so Constance's own family proved her very point wrong. With the attack being launched, Constance and Fiona then had a final showdown in the house where it seemed like only one of them survived. The house was burning and one person emerged at the doorway before the final episode cut to black. Personally, I think it's Fiona. We heard how much she was a fighter and that she fought for everything that she had in life, so if only one survives, which I don't think will be the case, I think they both will, it will probably be Fiona. The Van Ness family had been choking the town for a long time, and it feels like that might well come to a stop now that their empire quite literally went up in flames. With regards to Trisha, the conflict within her mind on if she should be loyal to her family or if she should be with Elias was something that was deeply ingrained within her for the entirety of the runtime. She didn't have the anger, passion, and rage like her mother, and she just wanted to merely be a citizen of Angel Ridge. Even after finding out that Elias knew about what happened to Willem, she picked up his jacket after he got rid of it and wore it, showing that the conflict in her mind was still ever present and that she relates more to the civilians than she does her own family. With the deal being off the table for the Hollow, it feels like when the show returns, if Constance is still alive, she'll be continuing to search for how to acquire it, or if now, with her home in disarray and quite literally losing everything for this project that she had, she'll now see what it's like to live on the other side. So, there you have it, a review of The Abandons and the ending explained.